Get ready for a journey that transcends time, diving deep into one of humanity's most enigmatic and impactful stories. This isn't just a legend. It's a tale that echoes the millennia, challenging us to reflect on the nature of good and evil, obedience and disobedience, and the choices that shape our destiny. Today, we will unravel the saga of the Nephilim, the giant of antiquity, and to do so, we will rely on a crucial source that complements the sacred scriptures, the Book of Enoch. This book, while not part of the biblical canon for many traditions, is a treasure trove of details and context that helps us better understand the concise mention we find in the Bible about these mysterious beings. It gives us a richer perspective on the origin, life, wickedness, and end of these beings who so deeply impacted the earth before the Great Flood. So, take a deep breath, because what you are about to hear is a spiritual epic that will make you feel every moment as if you were there. The dawn of darkness, the origin of the Nephilim. Imagine a time far, far in the distant past, right after the creation of humanity. Earth was a place of beauty, of potential, but also of a fragile innocence. Humanity was beginning to multiply, and with it, the complexity of interactions, moral dilemmas, and the free will that God granted us. But not everything that multiplied was good. In the midst of this scene, one that the book of Genesis, in its chapter 6 and verses 1 to 4, concisely presents to us, the Book of Enoch opens a window into a celestial and terrestrial drama that would change the course of history. It wasn't just men observing the daughters of men. There were other eyes from beings who inhabited the heavenly heights, whom we call angels. But these were not angels who remained in their holy and divine designation. The Book of Enoch tells us about a group of angels, around 200 of them, who were known as the Watchers or Grigori. They were designated to observe humanity, to serve God in their heavenly posts. But the purity of their purpose was corrupted by covetousness. They looked upon the daughters of men, the women of earth, and saw in them a beauty that seduced them, a beauty that awakened in them forbidden desire, a passion that was in total disharmony with God's will. Led by an angel named Semiaza, they made a pact, a collective oath on Mount Hermon. They swore that, no matter what, they will fulfill their desire, even if it meant condemnation, a decision that would seal not only their own destinies but that of an entire era. And so they descended. Yes, they descended from the heavens, abandoning their posts, their divine responsibilities, and came to earth. And they did not come as peaceful visitors or messengers of God, but as invaders with selfish and disobedient purpose. They approached the women, took them as wives, and from this unnatural union, the union between fallen celestial beings and human women, they were born, the Nephilim. Think carefully about the breaking of barriers this represented, a violation of the natural and spiritual order created by God. It was not meant to be. It was a perversion of creation. The rise of the giants, how the Nephilim lived. The Nephilim were no ordinary children. They were born giants. The word Nephilim in Hebrew means the fallen ones, those who cause the fall, or even the violent ones. And they lived up to their name. Imagine the terror. Amidst the humanity still in its infancy, these colossal beings emerged. The narrative describes these beings as having an insatiable hunger, a voracious appetite that went far beyond what the earth could offer for normal sustenance. Initially, they devoured all the food that men produced, but their thirst for more was endless. When there was no longer enough food, their wicked and insatiable nature led them to even greater depravity. They turned against humanity itself. Yes, the Nephilim began to devour men. Think of the scene: cities, villages, homes, consumed by fear. The shadow of these merciless giants looming over the life of every person. They were not merely large. They were the personification of violence, of boundless cruelty. They were the ultimate predators of an earth that was once meant to be a garden. And it didn't stop there. The parents of the Nephilim, the fallen angels, not only begot these monstrous but also became masters of forbidden arts. The Book of Enoch details how they taught humanity all manner of wickedness and secret knowledge that should not have been revealed. Azazel, for example, taught men how to make swords, shields, and armor, the tools of war. He taught women the art of seductively adorning themselves, to use cosmetics and create false attractions. Semyaza taught sorcery, the use of roots and astrology. Others taught how to observe the stars for divination, metallurgy to create weapons and jewelry, the cutting of precious stones, and even the mixing of elixirs and the use of herbs for evil purposes. The world became chaos. Innocence was stolen, peace was destroyed, and the land was filled with injustice, bloodshed, and all sorts of impiety. Humanity, instead of evolving under divine grace, was being corrupted by demonic influences and the tyranny of these giants. It's at this point that we should pause and think. The story of the Nephilim is not just about physical giants, but about the spiritual gigantomachy that unfolded. It's about the invasion of evil into the world, about how disobedience and covetousness can generate monsters, not just in physical form, but within the human soul. It's about how a single act of rebellion, coming from beings with great power and wisdom, can have catastrophic ramifications that affect generations and destroy order. If you're finding this story fascinating and thought-provoking, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video so more people can delve into this epic disobedience against God and divine displeasure. The disobedience of the fallen angels, which gave rise to the Nephilim, was not an isolated act, a momentary lapse. It was a conscious rebellion, an intentional disregard for God's authority and holy will. They knew the celestial laws, the divine order, but chose to ignore them for their own lust and ambition. Think of the magnitude of this transgression. Angels, beings of light and glory, created to serve and worship, chose to corrupt themselves and God's creation. They not only sinned but introduced a new lineage of wickedness on earth, which was oppressing, consuming, and destroying everything God had deemed good. God, in his infinite holiness and justice, cannot tolerate sin. God's displeasure with this situation is powerfully described in the Scriptures. The Book of Genesis, in its chapter 6 and verse 5, tells us that the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. It wasn't just one or another bad act. It was the totality of humanity, its essence, its innermost thoughts, which were irremediably corrupted. The imagination of the thoughts, that is, everything that came from the mind and heart, was consistently and incessantly evil. And this corruption had deep roots in the acts of the fallen angels and the existence of the Nephilim. They not only did evil, but they inspired evil, they spread evil. The atmosphere of the earth was dense with the presence of impiety, of violence. The cries of the victims rose to the heavens, calling for justice. The Book of Genesis, in its chapter 6 and verse 6, continues, revealing a profound truth about God's heart. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. This expression, regretted, does not mean that God made a mistake or changed his mind like a human. It means that he felt deep pain and sorrow over humanity's choice, which had strayed so completely from the purpose for which it was created. It grieved him to his heart. The Creator was saddened and even disillusioned with the trajectory of his most beloved creation. The presence of Nephilim and the total corruption that followed were the last straw. They were the physical manifestation of disobedience, living proof that the boundary between heaven and earth had been terribly violated and that evil had spread unchecked. The divine decision, why God destroyed them. Faced with such corruption, such pain, and such an offense to his holiness, God made a drastic and inevitable decision. Why did he destroy them? The answer is multifaceted and deeply connected to his nature and his plan for creation. First, it was a matter of divine justice. God is just. He cannot allow injustice and wickedness to prevail indefinitely. The cries of the oppressed, the spilled blood, the corrupted earth called for an accounting. If God did not act, he would be endorsing evil, which is impossible for a holy God. Second, it was to preserve the purity of a human lineage and his plan of salvation. The Bible shows us that, even amidst total depravity, there was a man who walked with God, Noah. He was righteous and blameless in his generation. Noah's lineage was crucial for the future of humanity and for God's plan to send a Savior. If corruption continued, if the genetic mixture with fallen angels and Nephilim spread even further, humanity could become irremediably contaminated, and the purity necessary for fulfillment of divine promises could be lost. The destruction of the Nephilim and that corrupted generation was a drastic but necessary surgery to save the patient humanity from complete spiritual death. Third, it was a judgment against the rebellion of the fallen angels. God not only judged humanity and the Nephilim, but also severely punished the angels who abandoned their post. The book of Jude, in its chapter 1 and verse 6, and the second book of Peter, in its chapter 2 and verse 4, speak of these angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own habitation, and how God has kept them in eternal chains under gloomy darkness for the judgment of the great day. God decided to start anew, so to speak, not on a whim, but for a profound purpose of purification and redemption. The book of Genesis, in its chapter 6 and verse 7, tells us, "So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind, whom I have created, from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground, and birds of the air, for I regret that I have made them." This decision, though painful, was an act of love and justice towards his creation. It was the only way to pluck evil out by the root and give life a new chance through Noah and his family. The great flood, how God did it. The decision was made. God looked at the earth and saw its corruption, its cry for justice, and he chose a path of radical purification, a global flood. However, in the midst of that total darkness, a light shone. One man, only one man, found favor in the eyes of the Lord, Noah. The book of Genesis, in its chapter 6 and verse 8, tells us, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." And in verse 9 it adds, "These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generations. Noah walked with God." God revealed his plan to Noah. He commanded him to build an ark, a gigantic vessel, with exact measurements and specific details. Noah was to gather his family, his wife, his 3 sons, and his sons' wives, and a pair of every kind of animal or 7 pairs of clean animals, to preserve life on earth. Imagine the scene. Noah, a righteous man, preaching about a flood that had never been seen or heard of before. The people around him, caught up in their wickedness and worldly pleasures, mocking him, doubting, continuing their lives of impiety. Meanwhile, the Nephilim, with their colossal strength and insatiable appetite, probably watched with disdain, laughing at the folly of this old man building a boat on dry land. They, the mighty giants, feared nothing. But God's time arrived. In the book of Genesis, chapter 7, and verses 11 to 12, we read, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. The earth trembled, the heavens opened, the waters of the abyss burst forth. An uncontrollable torrent, an unprecedented flood began. The rain did not stop, day and night, for 40 days and 40 nights. The water poured down, and the Nephilim, where were the giants, the mighty, the oppressors, those who devoured men, who caused terror. Their brute strength, their imposing stature, were of no avail against the overwhelming force of the divine waters. The end of the Nephilim, drowned in the waters of judgment. Yes, the Nephilim died. They had no escape from the fury of the waters. There was no mountain high enough, no cave deep enough. The Bible is clear, and the Book of Enoch complements it, that the purpose of the flood was to sweep all wickedness from the face of the earth, and this included the offspring of the fallen angels. The Book of Genesis, in chapter 7, and verses 19 to 24, is the irrefutable proof of the destiny of the Nephilim, of that corrupted generation, and of everything that breathed outside the ark. And the waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. Chapter 7, verse 19. The waters rose above the mountains, covering them to a depth of more than 15 cubits. Chapter 7, verse 20. Think about that. The waters covered all the high mountains. Not a single peak remained above water level. The Nephilim, no matter how large, could not have survived such depth and pressure. And verse 21 is even more explicit. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. All flesh, all mankind. This included the Nephilim. There was no exception for their strength, their size, or their angelic ancestry. The waters of divine judgment made no distinction. They were swept away, submerged, drowned. Their gigantic bodies, which once instilled terror, now lay inert beneath the turbulent waters. The Book of Genesis, in chapter 7 and verse 23, concludes this terrible fate. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. This is how God did it. With an act of judgment and purification, he removed the evil that had corrupted the earth. The Nephilim, the terrible offspring of disobedience and lust, were annihilated. It's important to remember that the Book of Enoch reinforces this idea, describing the punishment of the Watchers and their offspring as a central element for the purification of the world before its renewal through Noah. Their destruction was a necessary act for humanity to have a new chance, free from the direct influence of these monstrous beings and the corruption that they and their fallen angel parents had spread. If this narrative is touching you and making you reflect, don't hesitate to leave your comment below. We want to know what you think. Powerful reflections for daily life. We have reached the end of the Nephilim saga, an epic story that takes us back to the dawn of the world. But this is not just an ancient tale to entertain us. It is a mirror, a map of profound lessons that apply directly to our lives today. 1. The gravity of disobedience. The story of the fallen angels and the Nephilim begins with disobedience. Angels who abandon their place, their purpose, for selfish desire. This makes us think, how often in our lives are we tempted to abandon the principles we know to be right, to disobey the voice of our conscience or the commandments God has given us, in pursuit of a momentary pleasure, a selfish gratification? Disobedience never comes alone. It always brings with it a series of consequences, often unpredictable and devastating. Small acts of disobedience can open doors to big problems. Think about it. Is it worth trading peace and righteousness for a passing impulse? 2. Corruption begins in the heart. The angels coveted the daughters of men. The wickedness of Nephilim and that generation began in their thoughts, in the desires of their hearts. The Bible teaches us that out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. Book of Matthew, chapter 15 and verse 19. If we do not guard our hearts, if we allow impure thoughts and desires to take root, they can grow and manifest in actions that corrupt not only ourselves, but also those around us. How about today, we start cleaning up our thoughts, expelling what does not edify and cultivating what is good, pure and true? 3. Choices generate consequences. Angels' choice resulted in filth. Humanity's choice to follow wickedness resulted in flood. Every choice we make has a consequence. Some are immediate, others manifest over time, and some, as we see in this story, affect generations. We are not islands. Our decisions impact our family circles, our friends, our community. If we choose the path of righteousness, love, compassion, we will spread good things. If we choose selfishness, anger, wickedness, we will leave a trail of destruction. What legacy do you want to build with your daily choices? 4. God's mercy and justice go hand in hand. It's easy to see the flood as an act of pure wrath, but it is also an act of justice and, paradoxically, of mercy. Mercy for creation that was being annihilated by evil, and mercy for future humanity, which needed a fresh start. God does not delight in destruction, but he cannot turn a blind eye to injustice and corruption. This teaches us that God is a God who sees, who cares, and who, although loving and patient, is also just and will set limits for evil. There is always a chance to start over, to turn to him before it's too late. How have you responded to God's warnings and voice in your life? 5. The importance of walking with God. Noah was the exception. In a world utterly corrupted, he walked with God. He was not perfect, but he was righteous in his time and maintained an intimate relationship with the Creator. It was this relationship that saved him, his family, and allowed life to continue. Amidst the pressures of the world, temptations, the chaos that sometimes surrounds us, the only true anchor is our relationship with God. Maintaining this connection, seeking his will, living according to his principles, is our refuge, our ark amidst the storms of life. How is your walk with God today? Have you dedicated time to him, to his word, to prayer? 6. The ongoing struggle between good and evil. The story of the Nephilim reminds us that spiritual battle is real. From the very beginning, there are forces that try to mislead us, corrupt us, lead us to disobedience. But just as God acted in that era, He continues to act today, giving us strength, wisdom, and discernment to resist evil and choose good. We are not alone in this battle. Consider these reflections not as mere historical curiosities, but as keys to living a fuller life with purpose and aligned with eternal principles. The story of the Nephilim, of the fallen angels of the flood, is a poignant reminder that our actions have weight, that disobedience has a price, but that God's grace always provides a path to redemption for those who seek Him. May this epic journey inspire you to examine your own life, strengthen your faith, and make choices that honor the Creator. This is not just a story. It is a call to deep reflection and personal transformation. I hope this narrative has been engaging, informative, and inspiring. If you enjoyed this deep exploration of the Nephilim and the lessons we can draw from it, please leave your like. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming spiritual epics, and share this video with your friends and family so more people can be edified by this message. Thank you very much for your attention and for embarking on this adventure with us. May God bless you.